Y'all, Nicki Minaj is back on X, and she's coming for Jay-Z. So in a series of tweets, Nicki Minaj is claiming that Jay-Z owes her 100 to 200 million.
Part 2, the timeline of all this is not just important, it is everything. In high-stakes labor negotiations, timing often tells you more than press releases ever could, and right now the calendar itself is practically screaming that something is off. NBA ownership representatives delivered their latest proposal on a Friday, and on the surface, that might sound routine. But here is the detail that changes the entire tone of the story. That proposal arrived more than 6 full weeks after they had received the player's previous offer. 6 weeks is not a minor delay. In negotiation language, 6 weeks can feel like an eternity. It signals hesitation, calculation, and sometimes deliberate strategy. Because when both sides are eager to reach a deal, responses tend to move quickly. When responses take that long, it usually means positions are hardening rather than softening. That kind of gap does not reflect momentum. It reflects distance. It suggests that instead of closing in on common ground, both parties may be digging trenches and fortifying their positions, preparing for a prolonged standoff rather than a swift compromise. And the players clearly understood that signal because they did not wait around casually once the proposal arrived. By Sunday, the union had already organized an emergency executive committee call to address the situation. The urgency of that meeting alone tells you how seriously they viewed the offer. But what happened during that call is perhaps the most revealing detail of all. According to Stewart, the first priority was not even breaking down the specifics of the league's proposal. It was making sure everyone within the Players Association was aligned on what they themselves were demanding. Think about that for a second. Before analyzing management's offer, they had to make sure their own side was unified. That detail hints at something subtle, but significant beneath the surface: potential cracks in the solidarity the union has been projecting publicly for months. Since December, the WNBPA has presented a strong, unified front to the outside world, emphasizing shared goals and collective resolve. But behind closed doors, reality can be more complicated. Not every player stands in the same financial position, and not every athlete has the same level of security if negotiations drag out or collapse entirely. We have already seen glimpses of that tension through comments from players themselves. Australian guard Jade Melbourne, for instance, openly acknowledged that she could not realistically afford a lockout scenario. Rookie Baylor Sharman, speaking candidly in an interview, admitted she was genuinely worried about the possibility of missing paychecks. Those are not statements from superstars with massive endorsement portfolios. Those are voices from players who rely heavily on their league salaries just to maintain stability. That distinction matters. Because while the union leadership includes high-profile names with global recognition and alternative income streams, a large portion of the league consists of athletes fighting for roster spots, short contracts, and financial security. Some of them are watching negotiations unfold with a very different emotional stake. They see leaders like Stewart, Nneka Agwamike, and Nafisa Collier, players who have access to off-season leagues, brand deals, and international contracts, steering the strategy. And quietly, some are wondering whether those leaders fully grasp how devastating a prolonged work stoppage could be for the league's rank-and-file members. This is where labor negotiations become more than numbers on spreadsheets. They become human stories about risk tolerance. For a superstar with multiple income streams, missing a season is inconvenient. For a mid-tier or developing player, missing a season can threaten rent, career momentum, and even their place in the league. That difference in lived reality can shape how each player views the same proposal. And when a union contains members whose financial realities differ, that dramatically maintaining unity becomes just as challenging as negotiating with ownership. So the timeline is not just a sequence of dates. It is a window into the psychology of both sides. The 6-week silence, the emergency call, the internal alignment discussion. Each piece is a clue, and when you line them up, they paint a picture of negotiations that are not just slow, they are strained, delicate, and walking a tightrope between solidarity and fracture.
I remember he didn't want 50 at the Super Bowl. That was crazy.
And if Dame Dash was the architect who helped Jay-Z ascend to the throne, the next figure in this tangled web of feuds was Cameron Giles, also known as Killer Cam, an artist who watched the empire flip before his very eyes and didn't stay quiet about it. Cam brought a distinct energy to the situation, bold, fearless, and unapologetically Harlem, the kind of personality that refuses to be sidelined, no matter who's in power. Unlike some of the quieter disputes, Cam's beef with Jay-Z was loud, brash, and theatrical, unfolding both through bars and in public perception, creating one of the most memorable clashes in early 2000s hip-hop. Cameron signed to Rockefeller in 2001, at a time when the label was rapidly expanding its roster and influence. Under the guidance of Dame Dash, he landed significant opportunities, including substantial advances reportedly totaling $4.5 million, and released a string of hits like Oh Boy and Hey Ma. which dominated airwaves and solidified his status as a Harlem icon. However, the landscape shifted dramatically in 2004 when Jay-Z became president of Def Jam. Suddenly, Cam alleges, the promises and agreements he had were disregarded. Positions within the label, which had been verbally assured to him, were altered or cancelled entirely, leaving him feeling boxed out and betrayed by the very organization that had launched him. By 2006, the simmering tension erupted into public conflict. Cameron released You Got to Love It, a track that directly addressed Jay-Z, questioning his age, credibility, and authenticity in the rap game. The song featured audacious claims, including veiled accusations about Jay-Z's involvement in dangerous situations, implying that he had indirectly contributed to violent incidents Cam had endured. He followed up with Swagger Jacker, meticulously comparing their lyrics side by side and calling out instances where he believed Jay had borrowed from his style or content. The back and forth was a blend of street storytelling and industry critique, highlighting not just rivalry, but the deep sense of betrayal Cam felt as someone who had been nurtured under the Rockefeller banner. Behind the scenes, the feud had personal and professional dimensions. Jay-Z reportedly had Cam's verse removed from the Oh Boy remix, which prompted Cam to reclaim the track independently, further escalating tensions. The situation didn't fully resolve until 2019, when both artists performed on stage together at Jay-Z's Sides 2 concert at Webster Hall in New York City. They publicly acknowledged their past conflicts, and Cam admitted that while it felt strange to reconcile after years of tension, he respected the growth and perspective that came with time. Cameron's feud illustrates a recurring pattern in Jay-Z's career. Relationships that start with mentorship, collaboration, or admiration often evolve into rivalry, especially when power, business decisions, or leadership transitions come into play. Cameron was once a close ally, someone who benefited from the Rockefeller infrastructure, and yet the shift in leadership and priorities exposed him to feelings of betrayal and marginalization. The Cameron chapter also underscores the complexity of Jay-Z's rise, as he accumulated power, influence, and control over Rockefeller and later Def Jam. His earlier partners and protégés were forced to navigate the tension between loyalty, opportunity, and ambition. This duality, fostering talent while consolidating authority, would become a recurring theme throughout his career, setting the stage for future conflicts with both artists and collaborators. Ultimately, Cam's story is one of loyalty-tested, empire-building gone awry for those on the inside, and the harsh realities of navigating a music industry where friendship, mentorship, and business are deeply intertwined. It's proof that in Jay-Z's world, admiration and resentment often exist side by side, creating a combustible environment where allies can quickly become adversaries.
You could compare him to like a character now, I'd say he's like the Penguin. He's like ruthless like that.
If you thought the tension with Nicki Minaj was extreme, just wait until you hear how deep it goes when it intersects with personal pride, legacy, and pure Harlem attitude. Nicki's feud with Jay-Z escalated into a full-blown public war because it wasn't just about business or missed checks, it was about respect, recognition, and being acknowledged as a major force in the industry. From her explosive verse on Kanye's Monster in 2010, where she absolutely dominated the track and made the world notice her as a lyrical powerhouse, to her co-ownership of the streaming platform Tidal, she was deeply entangled in the web of Jay-Z's empire. Yet despite all her contributions, she claims she was sidelined when it mattered most. The heart of the beef, according to Nicki, is financial and deeply personal. When Jay sold Tidal to Square in 2021 for nearly $300 million, Nicki asserts she received nothing, despite supposedly holding a 3% stake. She publicly called out the injustice, saying she didn't see one red penny from the transaction, a statement that sparked massive conversation across social media and hip-hop news outlets. By 2025, she went further, claiming Jay-Z owed her between $100 million and $200 million in what she described as karmic debt. But her grievance extends beyond money. She has accused both Jay-Z and Roc Nation CEO Desiree Perez of deliberately undermining her career. From allegedly using bots to suppress her social media reach to rigging Billboard charts and award nominations, Nicki paints a picture of calculated obstruction. Her frustration also intersected with other public controversies involving Roc Nation's influence on high-profile events. For example, when Kendrick Lamar was chosen over Lil Wayne for the 2025 Super Bowl halftime show, an event that Nicki publicly associated with favoritism, she immediately expressed her outrage. She felt that her Young Money family had been disrespected and went scorched earth on social media, calling out Jay-Z in a series of posts that mixed direct accusations with humor, memes, and even AI-generated images portraying him in a pink wig. These posts went viral and showed just how far she was willing to go to make her voice heard. Nicki's approach demonstrates a recurring theme in Jay-Z's career. Admiration often morphs into resentment when influence, money, and recognition collide. Artists who once supported him, worked with him, or even aligned their careers with his ventures sometimes end up feeling exploited, ignored, or misled. Nicki's public airing of grievances is both a warning and a reflection of the stakes at the highest levels of the music business. She has not only challenged Jay-Z financially, but also questioned the ethics and loyalty within his inner circle, holding the mogul accountable in the most visible way possible. Her story is also unique because it intersects with gender in a male-dominated industry. Nicki Minaj became one of the most powerful women in rap, navigating a space where influence is concentrated among men and scrutiny is magnified. By publicly challenging Jay-Z, she asserts that female artists deserve both respect and financial fairness, even when facing a legend who wields enormous power in the industry. In doing so, she carved out her own chapter in hip-hop history, one where the consequences of success, loyalty, and empire building are questioned not just in music, but in real-world transactions and reputations. The Nicki Minaj vs. Jay-Z saga is a masterclass in how power, business, and personal pride collide. It's a high-stakes feud that combines financial grievances, corporate politics, artistic influence, and public scrutiny, making it one of the most intense and consequential chapters in modern hip-hop beef history. It proves that even the most dominant figures can face relentless challenges from those who helped elevate them, and it shows that respect, both earned and owed, remains one of the most valuable currencies in the game.
For me, I mean, Jay, you got to remember, he didn't want 50 at the Super Bowl. That was crazy. I'm like,
wait, Jay didn't want 50 at the Super
you didn't
Bowl?
know that? Yeah, he didn't want.
Well, I remember Eminem pushed for it.
That was some hater shit. Yeah,
I remember Eminem
yeah.
was like, I'm not going to do it unless 50 does it.
But before Nicki Minaj ever took the stage with accusations, there was another figure who had been sounding the alarm on Jay-Z's business moves for over 2 decades, Dame Dash. If Jay-Z sits on the throne today as one of the greatest moguls in music history, Dame Dash is the man who quite literally placed that crown on his head, adjusted it, and then spent the last 20 years insisting the throne was never fully his to keep. The story between them is equal parts mentorship, empire building, and ultimate betrayal. Dame Dash didn't just casually support Jay-Z, he was there from the beginning. He connected Jay to DJ Clark Kent, set up pivotal meetings, and became his manager, orchestrating tours that brought in millions. Together, they co-founded Rockefeller Records, which under their guidance grew from a small independent label into a cultural phenomenon. Dash was the strategist and visionary who helped transform a Brooklyn MC with no record deals into a multi-million-dollar brand, shaping the trajectory of hip-hop in the late 90s and early 2000s. At its peak, the Rockefeller empire was reportedly worth around $500 million, an astronomical figure for a label born in a Brooklyn office with modest beginnings. However, everything changed in 2004. Island Def Jam purchased the other half of Rockefeller, and Jay-Z accepted the presidency of Def Jam. Dame Dash was essentially left on the outside looking in, watching the empire he co-built slip through his fingers. From that moment on, he publicly accused Jay of betrayal, claiming that Jay prioritized his own ascent over their shared legacy. Dame said Jay deliberately sabotaged deals that were poised to benefit him directly. For instance, Dash claimed that Rocawear was about to close a $450 million partnership with Tommy Hilfiger, but Jay allegedly launched a competing venture at the last minute, tanking the deal's value and leaving Dash with crumbs compared to what he was owed. This narrative paints a picture of the classic mentor-turned-adversary story, but it also underscores a recurring pattern in Jay-Z's career, the fine line between strategic business moves and perceived betrayal. According to Dame Dash, the so-called snake move wasn't a one-off. It was part of a calculated effort to consolidate power and ensure Jay-Z controlled the empire they had built together. Over the years, Dame has consistently reminded the public that he played a central role in Jay-Z's rise, claiming that without his guidance, Jay's trajectory would have been markedly different. Dame's resentment didn't just manifest in words, it fueled an ongoing narrative that painted Jay as a brilliant, but often ruthless, businessman who would prioritize personal gain over loyalty. Even decades later, Dame continues to speak on Jay's decisions, shedding light on the inner workings of the Rockefeller empire, the early tours, and the strategic negotiations that helped Jay-Z become the mogul he is today. The tension between Jay-Z and Dame Dash serves as a cautionary tale about partnerships, ambition, and the cost of success in the music industry. It's a story of trust broken, empires built and lost, and the stark reality that in the world of hip-hop business, even your closest allies can become your harshest critics. This chapter set the stage for many of the feuds and public conflicts that would define Jay-Z's career in the years to come, illustrating that behind every legendary mogul, there's often a trail of complicated relationships, sacrifices, and unresolved disputes. Dame Dash's claims remain a central reference point whenever discussions arise about Jay-Z's rise, his strategic genius, and the shadow of betrayal that seems to follow his career, a theme that repeats itself throughout the saga of Jay-Z's legendary, controversial journey.
Look, when Jay signed his contract, the big one was with Beyonce. When he signed that contract, the marriage contract,
He got trophies.
no, those trophies, those fucking trophies came rolling in, buddy.
If Nas was the rival who nearly snatched Jay-Z's crown through lyrical warfare, then Curtis, 50 Cent, Jackson was the challenger who came dangerously close to eclipsing him in an entirely different arena, commercial dominance. And unlike many rap feuds that fade with time, this particular rivalry has lingered in the air for decades, resurfacing again and again because 50 Cent has never allowed the world to forget the numbers that once shifted the balance of power. The tension between them did not begin as a full-scale war. In fact, its origin story sounds almost playful on the surface. Back in 1999, a young and hungry 50 Cent from Southside, Queens released a track called How to Rob, a bold, tongue-in-cheek record where he imagined sticking up nearly every major rapper in the industry. Jay-Z's name was on that list, delivered with the kind of fearless humor that made listeners laugh while also recognizing the audacity behind it. Jay responded in classic competitive fashion. During a Summer Jam performance, he fired off the now legendary line, "I'm about $1. What the expletive is 50 Cent?" It was sharp, dismissive, and effective, a reminder that in hip-hop, clever bars can function like warning shots. Yet behind the scenes, the situation was not pure hostility. There was mutual respect, even camaraderie. The two artists would later share stages, most notably co-headlining the Rock the Mic tour in 2003, which suggested that whatever rivalry existed had not yet hardened into genuine animosity. At that point, it still resembled competitive sport rather than personal warfare. Then the numbers arrived, and numbers in the music industry can change everything overnight. When 50 Cent dropped Get Rich or Die Tryin', the album exploded commercially, moving more than 872,000 copies in its first week alone. That kind of debut does not just signal success, it rewrites hierarchies. Suddenly, the newcomer was posting sales figures that rivaled or surpassed veterans who had spent years building their empires. On the global stage, those statistics made it seem, at least momentarily, as though Jay-Z was being outpaced by the very artist many once considered the underdog. For most artists, that would have been a private competitive note. For 50 Cent, it became a talking point he has revisited repeatedly for more than 20 years, almost like a scoreboard he refuses to erase. Over time, his commentary evolved from subtle jabs into outright trolling. He has joked that Jay-Z makes golf course music, implying it caters more to elites than to the streets. He has criticized projects like 444 as being too intellectual for average listeners. He has accused Jay of gatekeeping opportunities, including decisions surrounding major events such as the Super Bowl halftime show. And on social media, 50 has treated these digs almost like a hobby, posting memes, sarcastic remarks, and running commentary that keeps their rivalry alive in public consciousness even when neither artist releases a diss track. In interviews throughout 2023 and 2024, 50 Cent pushed one of his most provocative claims yet, a theory that stirred debate across fan communities. He suggested that Jay-Z's extraordinary Grammy record, which now includes 25 wins making him the most awarded rapper in history, is not solely the result of his own artistry. Instead, 50 argued that level of recognition is connected to Jay's marriage to Beyoncé, implying that proximity to her global influence amplified his award success. Supporters of Jay-Z dismissed the idea as trolling, while critics entertained it as a bold, if controversial, perspective. Regardless of where listeners stood, the comments accomplished exactly what 50 Cent has always excelled at, keeping himself in the conversation while reigniting discussion about his long-running rivalry with one of hip-hop's most powerful figures. What makes this feud fascinating is not just the insults or the statistics. It is the contrast in styles. Jay-Z typically responds with calculated restraint, addressing conflicts through carefully chosen lyrics or strategic silence. 50 Cent, by contrast, thrives on spectacle and persistence, turning rivalry into entertainment that stretches across decades. One relies on composure, the other on provocation. And that clash of temperaments is precisely why their competitive tension remains one of the most talked about dynamics in modern hip-hop history.
I don't hate Jay. That ain't what this about. I don't hate him, but damn, dog, that's how you feel. I feel as though you owe me a conversation.
Right.
That's it. You too big to talk to me? You ate my mom oxtail. Fuck, you know what I mean? You too big to talk to me, yo? I feel as though I deserve that conversation, yo. Cause at any given time, when we was together, if anything got out of hand, yo, I put my life on the line for that rock. The music shit and battling, nigga. It was situations where I had to hold it down when security ain't had no burner.
And if Cameron's saga demonstrated how quickly mentorship can sour into rivalry, the next chapter in Jay-Z's complex web of relationships involved none other than Kanye West, a partnership that blurred the lines between family, friendship, and business. This wasn't just a typical artist versus mogul feud. It was a collision of creative vision, brotherhood, and personal betrayal that would leave lasting scars on both sides. Kanye, at one point, was more than just a collaborator. He was a creative partner, a trusted confidant, and arguably the architect behind some of Jay-Z's most iconic projects. Their relationship began with Kanye producing The Blueprint, one of Jay-Z's most celebrated albums, and eventually evolved into a creative and financial powerhouse through Watch the Throne, a joint project that became a cultural phenomenon. The tour that followed pulled in over $75 million across 34 dates, cementing their status as a dominant force in both music and live performance. Kanye even honored Jay in 2007 with the track Big Brother, a heartfelt ode detailing his admiration and respect for Jay's influence and guidance. For a time, their relationship was the epitome of mentor-mentee loyalty, an alliance built on mutual respect, creativity, and shared ambition. But cracks began to appear, and the first major rupture occurred in 2014. Jay-Z and Beyoncé didn't attend Kanye's wedding to Kim Kardashian, a personal slight that Kanye reportedly took very seriously. He confided in Charlemagne the God, saying that if someone is family, you never miss a wedding, a sentiment reflecting the personal nature of their fallout. The tension deepened with the 2016 Paris robbery incident involving Kim Kardashian. Kanye felt that Jay and Beyoncé failed to check on them during the crisis, which only compounded his sense of abandonment. The situation escalated publicly during Kanye's St. Pablo tour in 2016, a period marked by his well-documented mental health struggles. His on-stage rants, social media posts, and interviews made the feud highly visible, exposing a raw, emotionally charged rift between the two. The fallout wasn't just about music or business, it was deeply personal, touching on issues of loyalty, friendship, and family bonds. Jay-Z addressed parts of the tension musically on 4:44's Kill Jay-Z, referencing the financial dealings and support Kanye received, and later in interviews, he admitted that when Beyoncé and Blue Ivy were drawn into the conversation, Kanye had crossed a line. Though there were moments of reconciliation, such as Jay's guest appearance on Kanye's Donda event in 2021, the relationship remained fragile. The complexities of their history, combined with public scrutiny, made every interaction a potential flashpoint. Kanye's grievances reflected a recurring theme in Jay-Z's career. Individuals who are lifted to prominence through his influence often find themselves at odds with him later, either through perceived betrayal, miscommunication, or unmet expectations. The Kanye West chapter is illustrative of Jay-Z's broader pattern. Admiration and resentment often coexist in the same relationship. Artists who once revered him, aligned their careers with his vision, and trusted his guidance sometimes end up questioning his intentions, authority, and loyalty. This dynamic highlights one of the most fascinating aspects of Jay-Z's career, the constant balancing act between mentorship, empire building, and the inevitable personal conflicts that arise when power, influence, and ego intersect. Ultimately, the Jay-Z and Kanye West saga is a study in the volatility of close relationships under pressure. It underscores that even in the highest echelons of hip-hop, loyalty, creativity, and trust are fragile commodities, easily strained by ambition, personal missteps, or public perception. It's a vivid example of how admiration and rivalry, love and resentment can exist simultaneously in the world of hip-hop royalty.
I don't even know why you did that to yourself, man. When you was doing that verse, you should have been doing your job.
Finally, we arrive at one of the most explosive and publicized chapters in Jay-Z's career, his ongoing feud with Nicki Minaj, arguably the most powerful female rapper of all time. If you thought the conflicts with the male heavyweights were intense, Nicki's fire brought a whole new level of scrutiny, receipts, and public accountability to Jay-Z. Unlike some previous beefs rooted in personal slights, miscommunication, or business rivalry, Nicki's grievances are deeply tied to money, influence, and perceived betrayal, making this one of the most high-stakes conflicts in modern hip-hop. The root of the beef, according to Minaj herself, lies in the sale of Tidal's streaming platform, which Jay-Z sold to Square in 2021 for nearly $300 million. Nicki claims that she had a reported 3% stake in the platform and was instrumental in promoting it to the masses, yet when the sale went through, she received nothing. By her account, she should have earned a substantial sum, potentially between $100 and $200 million, but instead felt left out entirely. On social media, particularly TikTok, she openly expressed frustration, calling it a matter of karmic debt and accusing Jay-Z and Roc Nation CEO Desiree Perez of intentionally cutting her out of her rightful earnings. But it isn't just about the money. Nicki has repeatedly accused Jay-Z of blackballing her in the industry, alleging that he used bots to suppress her social media engagement, rig Billboard charts, and block her from award opportunities she rightfully earned. One of the most publicized flashpoints came when Kendrick Lamar was chosen over Lil Wayne for the 2025 Super Bowl halftime show, which Roc Nation orchestrates. Nicki went nuclear, publicly defending her Young Money family and lambasting Jay-Z for favoritism, bias, and undermining her career. She even posted AI-generated images mocking him, including one where he appeared in a pink wig, a symbolic gesture that combined humor, rage, and public shaming, making her criticisms impossible to ignore. Nicki Minaj's beef is particularly significant because it blends music, business, and cultural influence in a way few conflicts do. Her claims highlight a pattern in Jay-Z's empire, the tension between loyalty and financial strategy. Artists who helped build his ventures, contributed to their visibility, and invested years of effort can sometimes feel marginalized when corporate decisions are made. In Nicki's case, the combination of creative investment, promotional work, and perceived entitlement to a stake in Jay-Z's business ventures collided with the mogul's corporate maneuvers, sparking a highly public feud. What makes this chapter stand out is its modernity. Unlike the early days of subliminals, mixtapes, and localized studio wars, this conflict unfolded in a global, digitally connected environment. Social media, TikTok, AI-generated content, and instant reporting amplified the feud to unprecedented levels, making it visible to millions in real time. Fans could track receipts, screenshots, and posts as the saga unfolded, turning Nicki Minaj's grievances into a viral, multi-platform cultural event. Ultimately, Nicki Minaj's conflict with Jay-Z is a perfect illustration of the recurring theme across his career. Admiration and resentment exist side by side, and loyalty can be tested, strained, or broken when money, control, and influence collide. It underscores a simple truth about Jay-Z's world: being the king comes with enemies, both public and private, and even those closest to the throne can turn into critics when the stakes are high enough. This feud, like so many before it, cements Jay-Z's position not just as a rap legend, but as a figure whose career, relationships, and conflicts define the modern music landscape in ways that go far beyond bars and beats.
Y'all, Nicki Minaj is back on X, and she's coming for Jay-Z. So in a series of tweets, Nicki Minaj is claiming that Jay-Z owes her 100 to 200 million.
Part 5, and if Jay-Z could create that kind of distance between himself and someone who once rode for him like a loyal soldier, then it raises an even bigger question about what happens when the person challenging him is not a protege or a label mate, but a certified legend who helped build the very foundation he later stood on. That brings us to LL Cool J, a name that carries enormous historical weight in hip-hop, and especially within the legacy of Def Jam recordings. A lot of younger listeners might not immediately grasp just how important LL Cool J is to that label's origin story, but the truth is simple. Before there was a Def Jam dynasty, before the corporate deals, before the global expansion, there was LL. He was Def Jam's first official artist, signing back in 1984 when the label itself was barely more than a bold idea with ambition. At that time, Jay-Z was still a kid in Brooklyn, scribbling rhymes and dreaming about a future in music. So when Jay eventually became president of Def Jam in 2004, the optics alone created an unusual dynamic. Here was a newer generation superstar suddenly running the same house that an older generation icon had helped construct brick by brick. Even if both men were professionals, that kind of power shift naturally carries tension. According to LL Cool J, that tension did not stay subtle for long. He later spoke openly about feeling that Jay-Z's leadership did not properly support veteran artists who had already cemented their legacies. In LL's view, the label's promotional machine leaned heavily toward newer acts while established names were left to fend for themselves. The flashpoint for his frustration came during the rollout of his 11th studio album, Todd Smith. On paper, the project performed respectably, debuting at number 6 on the Billboard 200 and achieving gold certification. But LL believed it could have done far better with stronger backing from the label. He publicly suggested that the marketing push behind his release felt underwhelming, especially compared to the aggressive campaigns supporting younger stars who were being positioned as Def Jam's future. He specifically pointed to what he described as an imbalance in attention, claiming Jay-Z appeared more focused on promoting himself and select rising artists than on uplifting veterans who had already proven their value to the culture and the company. LL did not keep those feelings private. During interviews and appearances, he spoke candidly about what he saw as mismanagement. One of his most quoted remarks came during the 2006 MTV Video Music Awards, where he bluntly stated that Jay-Z did a real good job of promoting Jay-Z, a line that instantly spread through hip-hop media because of how direct it sounded. Coming from a pioneer widely respected across generations, that comment carried weight. It was not just criticism from a random peer. It was a founding figure of the very institution Jay was running, publicly questioning his leadership priorities. The tension also bled into music. LL released material that fans interpreted as lyrical shots, including lines that hinted at feeling overlooked or disrespected by industry figures acting like they did not recognize his legacy. For someone whose career had already spanned decades, that perceived lack of acknowledgement struck a nerve. And the situation intensified when Jay-Z began referring to himself as the greatest of all time, the GOAT, a title LL had long associated with his own brand and persona. In hip-hop, titles carry symbolic power, and overlapping claims can easily spark friction, especially when both artists have legitimate arguments for greatness. What makes this chapter fascinating is that it was never a screaming, headline-dominating feud filled with non-stop diss tracks. Instead, it simmered like a low flame, fueled by pointed comments, subtle jabs, and lingering tension. It represented a clash of eras as much as personalities, the pioneer who helped open the door and the mogul who later walked through it and rearranged the furniture. And in a genre where respect is currency, even the slightest perception of disrespect can echo for years.
Jay-Z has exhibited signs of envy, jealousy, hate, and stopping bags behind the scenes, allegedly. Why is it always the same story? So that means Nas made all of that stuff up. DMX made all of that stuff up.
And if Jim Jones showed how street-level intensity and Harlem swagger could fuel a public feud with Jay-Z, the next chapter of conflict shifted to the boardroom and courtroom, a clash where music, business, and billions of dollars collided, Birdman and Lil Wayne. Unlike most feuds that began over lyrical jabs or street credibility, this one was rooted in respect, competition, and perceived betrayal over financial and creative control, stretching across decades and involving some of the most influential figures in the music industry. The story began with genuine admiration. Early in his career, Lil Wayne revered Jay-Z, freestyling over his instrumentals and calling him the best rapper alive after the previous best had retired. They collaborated on classics like Mr. Carter and Hello Brooklyn 2.0, producing music that highlighted mutual respect and creative synergy. On the surface, their relationship seemed solid, built on artistry and shared vision. But underneath, tension was quietly brewing, largely driven by business maneuvers and the complex ecosystem of record labels, management, and royalties. The first major point of contention occurred in 2005 when Jay-Z, while president of Def Jam, allegedly tried to sign Lil Wayne away from Cash Money Records, offering $175,000, an offer that Wayne declined in favor of a significantly larger deal with Universal. Birdman, Wayne's mentor and Cash Money co-founder, interpreted this as Jay-Z attempting to poach his franchise artist, igniting feelings of mistrust and competition. This move created a ripple effect, as personal loyalty collided with business ambition. It was no longer just music, it was empire building, reputation management, and control over valuable assets in the industry. Years later, the feud would resurface in dramatic fashion. When Wayne released the Carter 4 under his own terms, subtle references to Jay-Z and his business dealings reignited tensions. In 2015, Birdman filed a $50 million lawsuit against Jay-Z and Roc Nation, claiming the mogul attempted to illegally profit from Wayne's streaming success to save Roc Nation's struggling platform. The case was eventually dismissed, but the resentment lingered, a reminder that legal victories rarely erase decades of perceived slights. The situation escalated once more in 2024, when Roc Nation chose Kendrick Lamar over Lil Wayne to perform at the Super Bowl halftime show in New Orleans, Wheezy's hometown. Birdman, already harboring long-standing bitterness over past business maneuvers, expressed discontent publicly, while Nicki Minaj, fiercely loyal to her Young Money family, went scorched earth on Jay-Z. Social media exploded with accusations, receipts, and commentary, turning a corporate decision into a full-blown cultural moment, demonstrating how intertwined personal, professional, and public perception is in hip-hop's highest levels. What makes the Birdman-Lil Wayne feud particularly illustrative of Jay-Z's world is the interplay between respect, loyalty, and commerce. Jay-Z's decisions, often framed as strategic and necessary from a corporate standpoint, can feel deeply personal to those on the receiving end. It highlights the constant tension he navigates, how to lead an empire, foster creative relationships, and simultaneously maintain control over a business that touches nearly every corner of the hip-hop world. Ultimately, the saga with Birdman and Lil Wayne exemplifies the modern Jay-Z dynamic. Feuds aren't just about music or bars, they're about power, control, and the stakes of running a business empire in an industry where loyalty and profit are constantly in tension. It's a story that underscores the complexity of Jay-Z's career, showing that even alliances founded on admiration and shared vision can fracture when money, influence, and opportunity collide.
And right before Tommy Hilfiger signs the papers, he makes an announcement saying that he's not f***ing with Rockwell, that he's only f***ing with S. Carter. The whole shit up. And I just feel like he did that only because I was going to make $40 million. Like, he just couldn't see, like, they get so mad if I'm going to make money off them. Like, every time I could have made a really big check, he's always stepped in and intentionally f***ed it up. Every time.
And if Kanye West demonstrated how loyalty can fracture under the pressures of fame, fortune, and ego, the next figure on this long list of Jay-Z conflicts is Jim Jones, a Harlem native and one of the most outspoken members of the Dipset crew. If Cameron was the general of Dipset's battles with Jay-Z, Jim Jones was the loudest, most aggressive soldier on the front lines, bringing a unique Harlem heat to the feud that made it deeply personal, visceral, and impossible to ignore. His style of confrontation wasn't just lyrical, it carried the attitude, swagger, and street-level intensity that made Harlem's voice impossible to silence. The pivotal moment in Jones's feud, as recounted by industry insiders like Freaky Zeke in a 2025 interview, allegedly occurred during a studio session when he slapped Lenny S. Santiago, Jay-Z's longtime Rockefeller executive. This incident, whether embellished or not, marked a clear point of no return between Dipset and Rockefeller. The physical altercation symbolized more than just disrespect. It represented the widening gap between Jay-Z's empire and the Harlem crews that had helped him rise. Jones escalated the conflict through music almost immediately. He dropped Kingdom Done, a preemptive strike before Jay-Z's Kingdom Come album, mocking Jay's claims about retirement and branding him a fraud. Jay-Z responded swiftly and creatively by flipping Jones's own hit, We Fly High, Ballin', into Brooklyn High, reclaiming the hook as a Brooklyn anthem and reasserting his dominance. But Jones wasn't finished. He countered with the We Fly High beef mix, calling Jay-Z and Nas old heads who reminded him of the Golden Girls, a bar that drew equal parts laughter and disbelief from fans. This lyrical exchange exemplifies the razor-thin line between entertainment, personal vendetta, and public spectacle in hip-hop. Yet what makes Jones's feud especially fascinating is how it evolved over time. By 2017, he signed a management deal with Roc Nation, the very company that had been at the center of their conflict. In the music business, this shows that the power of a bag financial opportunity can override years of beef, turning once bitter rivals into business partners, at least superficially. It's a recurring theme in Jay-Z's career. Conflicts that seem personal often have commercial undertones, and reconciliation or collaboration can happen if the numbers make sense. Jones's story also underscores a critical dynamic in Jay-Z's empire, the tension between loyalty, authority, and opportunity. Harlem crews and artists who supported Jay-Z in the early days often felt marginalized once he consolidated power. The combination of business acumen, corporate strategy, and creative control meant that those once close to him could quickly find themselves sidelined, replaced, or publicly disrespected. This is not to say Jay-Z acted without cause. Many decisions were strategic, but perception in hip-hop is everything, and actions that were calculated moves in the boardroom often felt like personal betrayals on the streets. Finally, Jim Jones's saga highlights another recurring pattern, the public nature of feuds in hip-hop. Unlike corporate disputes in other industries, these conflicts unfold in real time through music, interviews, social media, and live events, making every slight, diss, and counter-diss a part of the cultural record. Fans witness, analyze, and often pick sides, turning personal and professional disagreements into global narratives that can define careers. In Jim Jones's case, the feud became both a rite of passage and a spectacle, cementing his legacy as one of the most fearless and relentless voices to ever clash with Jay-Z. Ultimately, Jim Jones embodies the enduring principle in Jay-Z's world. Loyalty and conflict are inseparable. Allies can become adversaries, rivals can become collaborators, and every decision carries both personal and financial consequences. In the ever-evolving landscape of hip-hop, these battles are as much about survival and reputation as they are about music, cementing the legend and the controversy surrounding Jay-Z's reign.
Like Jay, I like the way I would look at it, like if you could compare him to like a character now, I'd say he's like the Penguin. He's like ruthless like that with his friends or people that help.
That right there, that moment, that tension, that energy is what it sounds like when a negotiation slams straight into a brick wall and refuses to move another inch. We are talking about a situation that is not just tense, but practically electrified with friction. Breanna Stewart, who is not only one of the WNBA's brightest stars, but also the vice president of the Women's National Basketball Players Association, stepped forward and made something unmistakably clear. She didn't hint. She didn't soften the message. She stated it outright. The league's most recent collective bargaining agreement proposal simply is not cutting it where it matters most. And the sticking point, the issue at the very center of the storm, is revenue sharing. Now, on paper, the league's offer might look impressive to casual observers. Owners came to the table presenting what they likely considered meaningful concessions. They included improved housing benefits, upgraded training and team facilities, and a salary cap increase projected to reach about $5.65 million by the 2026 season. Those are not tiny tweaks. Those are structural adjustments that, in another context, might be celebrated as progress. But Stewart's response landed like a gavel strike. Thanks, but no thanks. In other words, nice extras, but they are not addressing the core demand. From the player's perspective, all those added perks are cosmetic if they do not include a real share of league revenue. To them, those additions feel less like solutions and more like window dressing meant to distract from the real issue. And make no mistake, this is not theatrical posturing or negotiation theater designed to score headlines. This is a genuine philosophical clash about how a professional sports league should function in the modern era. The players believe their labor, visibility, and growing influence are driving the league's rise and therefore entitle them to a defined percentage of the revenue. Ownership, on the other hand, appears to be operating from a more traditional framework, one where they retain tighter financial control and offer fixed compensation increases rather than revenue-linked payouts. What makes the situation even more intense is the clock ticking loudly in the background. Training camp is scheduled to open in less than 3 months. That is not a comfortable cushion of time. That is a rapidly shrinking runway, and both sides are accelerating toward a deadline without any guarantee of a smooth landing. Every day that passes without meaningful progress increases the possibility of disruption, delays, or even a full-blown labor standoff. In professional sports, once you get this close to the start of a season without an agreement, tension doesn't just linger, it multiplies. So what we are witnessing is not a minor disagreement over contract wording or bonus structure. It is a fundamental dispute about economics, power, and the future direction of women's professional basketball. One side is saying, we want structural change and a percentage of the pie. The other is effectively replying, we'll raise your slice, but we're not changing how the pie is divided. And until those two philosophies find common ground, the sound you're going to keep hearing is exactly what we started with, the echo of negotiations hitting a wall and refusing to budge.